Hey guys, and welcome to today's tutorial. On this video I'm going to be teaching you how to tattoo a black and grey realism tiger. We already have it stenciled up here on a pound of flesh. I love these canvases, they're fucking awesome. They've got a nice wooden frame, and I think these at the moment are the best quality canvases I've used for tattooing on. I found this picture on Pinterest. I've had this saved for absolutely ages now, and I've been dying to tattoo it. So that's ready to go. I've got a couple of pictures here, just different sizes really. And the picture is pretty much perfect. I've just zoomed it in and filled the whole canvas. The grey wash is out as usual, the ones I mixed myself in the other videos. A bit of petroleum jelly, and the needles I'm using for this are a 5 round liner, 14 round shader and 15 mag. That's all we need. We don't need any others. I might add an extra liner for the white highlights, but yeah, that's about it. These cartridges that I'm using are black crown needles. I'll try and put the link in somewhere, but I've been using these for a while now, kind of mixing them up with the killer ink needles, and I really like them both. These are a lot more solid, they feel a bit more high quality than all of the cheaper needles. They are quite expensive, but they're really good. So yeah, I've been using them a lot recently, mixing them up with the other needles that I use. And this machine, which I've just done a review for, I really enjoyed using it on the review, so it puts in the ink really well on the fake skin. I haven't used this on a person yet, but on the fake skin it's absolutely amazing. And I don't need a power supply or anything like that, so it's super handy. So I can literally just set up and just start tattooing. So yeah, let's get into it and start the video. Right, cool. So to start with, I'm going to use the liner, 5 round liner. And I'm going to mark in slash put some black areas in to start with, just to get the main base down. So anywhere that's black that I can do now with the liner, I'll be putting in black, and parts where I just want to mark in and get it there, I will lightly line, almost just stipples, kind of skim over the surface to get it there. So bits where it is black, I'm going to put it in solid. But to be honest, I don't need loads of lines in a piece like this. Ideally, the less lines the better, and I just want to literally start just colouring in. So that's kind of what I'm going to do. The bits that are prominent I will line, and then the line that I'm mainly going to use for the textures, little dots and fur, to get the base down. So what volts have we got here? So we're using 8 volts. I will be using the black, even if it is lighter areas. I don't use any the greys to do any of that. I just literally, the lighter I want it, the less I put it in, the more I skim on the top. And I'm literally just dab away as well, because I don't want to rub that stencil off. And don't worry about getting all of this really solid, because in a piece like this there isn't really any lines, so it's more just marking it in and getting it there. And even though the stencils are solid on here, I tattoo them like it is going to be on a real person. So on a real person I do mark in areas in case the stencil starts like coming off. So you see here where I'm just kind of skimming it in, and then a part like this where it is solid, and literally like I'm colouring with the needle, and it's just kind of rubbing back and forth. I'm not as such doing a line and dragging it, I'm just treating it like I'm colouring it in. I think that's a big key when you're doing realism, is not like harshly put the lines in, because they stand out a mile and that's what makes it look cartoony. So the more you can just like rub, flick and like colour bits in, it gives a lot better effect than harsh lines. That's where people go wrong, I think, from the start, is they start lining bits in and they just stand out too much. So even if you like dotting parts in, and don't veer too much away from how it is on the picture. So if there's no line there, don't put a line there. And I know that sounds really obvious, but some lines, even when you've shaded, you can't get rid of or see. So for example, this tooth here, on the picture it has shades next to it and black on one side, so it would be okay to black that side, but on here I don't want it too harsh. So the best thing for me to do is just to skim the whole tooth in, then when I black behind, it leaves it negative rather than putting a line that you might be able to see at the end. So what I'm doing here is I'm kind of just skimming the line in. So that way it's going to be more of like a light grey, which you can see there. So it's still there, and when I create the black here, it's going to make it like kind of leave it white. And remember, with these lines you can go back and sharpen it and get into the corners. I'm not overly worried about getting the final look yet. It's more just temping it all in to get that base layer down. So in this corner it's black, so I can happily do that black and then fade out again for this tooth. It is quite stressful when you're looking at it at first, but it is just planning it and getting used to the correct way that you're going to go about laying it out. So even lighter on this part of the tongue that I'm mapping in. But because I'm lining it with black, when I do go over to darken areas, you're not going to be putting black over like a grey that won't be there, which is the best way to go about it. Because if I did this with grey, then tried to make it black, it'll never go solid black. So that's the good thing with these shades, and the way I go about it, you can make it black. You can see the the more stressful the parts are, the quieter I am. That's going in really nice on here, so I'm kind of just temping it in all over. Then when I'm happy, I can then start blocking in some areas of black and putting some shades in. Now the more background it is, the more loose I'm being with the shades as well. So like here where I'm just literally skimming a few parts in, I'm not overly worried about getting that so accurate. So the main thing here that I'm thinking as I'm lining, or kind of like temping it in, is don't line it black where it's not going to be shaded and covered the lines to disappear, because you don't want the lines to be visible when it's a finished tattoo. So you can see most of the lines that I've put in, none of them are even black at the moment. There's the odd area like here and a couple of bits just where it's a little bit darker, and that's because they are gonna be black. You can see here where I'm even almost colouring and skimming some of the areas in, and that's just helping me see it a lot more clear when I come to colour it black. Like if there's an area that you can just lightly skim over and get a little base down, it does help massively, especially in between like the whiskers of the tiger, and it's just getting that shape there but it not being fully done. And the reason I'm not fully finishing it now is because if I start colouring in a black part there, bits of the stencil will come off or be blurry, and then it'll just end up being me trying to make it up and get it right. You can see here already where it's quite stressful to get it marked in. So yeah, definitely don't do these bits too harsh. Now you can see already it looks a hell of a lot easier to then start piecing together once we've got these parts in. And it's, yeah, even the parts that are going to be black and shaded over, it even goes for the parts that are going to be grey and shaded over. So bits like here on the top of the nose, I've just done that so lightly because that might not even be all black. Well, it's not on the picture, so you don't want it to be more than like a medium grey, because otherwise you're going to see them parts as well. So just think, when you're doing these lines, every bit that you do, make it so it can disappear, and that even if it's not going to, you want to be able to adjust and do it how you want. And that's why I haven't even put in the top of these teeth yet, because I might just want to just shade that and not even put any lines there. Now this is just the first layer of the lines, so once I'm happy with this, I might then put a few shades in, then go back with the liner and start really sharpening things up. And it's the same like the parts that I can't do with the liner to temp in, so like I mentioned with the top of the teeth, I might mark them in with like a round shader rather than the liner, just to get it even softer. But parts like around the teeth and the eye, they're where I want it to be really prominent, because that is going to be the main focus of the design. So these are going to be a lot more sharper. You can hear already I'm putting these in a lot deeper straight off. And this bit now, I'm doing this just straight in black straight away. And I am kind of dotting in the black here. Like I say, I'm not lining, I'm using it as if I'm using it as just a smaller shader to colour. And this is just practice and practice of knowing that you're not overworking the skin. But I find, to begin with, like, my advice would be to dot it if you're not sure how much you can work the skin, because the dots is a lot easier, and you know exactly how much you've worked the skin with the dots, whereas the more colouring technique with the liner, you can easily overwork the skin. So like I said before, I'm not lining the lines, I'm kind of dotting and flicking them in, and that's just to give it a more realistic look, which is why I don't kind of line any of this. You know, I'm not dragging a line up there, even though it is quite smooth. I kind of want that look, and then if I want to, I can bring the mag or shade it to being more smooth. So everything that I do on here, I want to build it up to it, not start off with a line that's at a finished point, because I want room to adjust and kind of make it into that. I think that helps create a lot more realistic look. I think it's just room to adjust as well, like say if I'm doing script, I'll always line it on the inside rather than on the line or the outside, and it just gives you that room to adjust and just room to play with the design. I have got quite carried away with the lines here. I can pretty much start shading whenever, but I think the more I can map it in and get it more precise, it'll be a lot easier for me to shade. But as you can see, I'm not really lining anything, I'm more just kind of knocking in the shapes and getting it to where I want to be as a permanent stencil. Right, so now we have them lines temped in. I've only done a couple more little bits here and there. I'm going to put in some light parts with the round shader, and then I'm going to put the black in. So I'm still building up like a permanent stencil here, so no shades are kind of finished. So what I'm doing here is just kind of making a few bits stand out that little bit more and get the layer down before I start then putting blacks in, which these bits will be then really hard to do if I didn't have these in now. So just under the tongue, maybe little bits on the teeth, just kind of anywhere that I want in. So this bit here, it is grey, so I'm putting in like just kind of like a couple of passes to get just a hint of something there. So I'm almost building the image up as like an invert to start with, so it'll have everything bar the black. So that way when you put black in, you'll look at it like a lot simpler and easier to do. And it's very frustrating to do it like this at first, because you do some parts and you do just want to finish it. So like here, I could easily just carry on and shade the whole tooth, but you really do need to build up them layers and kind of think more further down the line with the tattoo rather than the right now. Because once the black's in, and this is the reason why I do it this way, is depending on the skin and the tone of the skin, or even just the piece in general, how it looks, you might change your mind and have some shades lighter to stand out more, or darker. It just gives you that room to build up to how you want it, rather than you know, just doing it how it is straight off the bat. So at the moment I'm doing the needs must parts. And obviously same with the liner, don't shade parts that are going to be black, because obviously once you've shaded it, it's not going to go black after that. So yeah, I'll only be shading the parts that are actually going to be shaded here. So for example, in these gaps I'm not doing the background, I'm putting a couple of shades in that are on the feathers, or under here where it is grey on the picture. And I mean, obviously where it's dark grey, then bits anywhere where there is a shade or built up to being dark, not the black areas that you want solid black. So now what I was on about before, I'm temping in the shade on these teeth. And I haven't mentioned the shades too much because, to be honest, I could use any shade I want to be doing this. I'd just go probably lighter on the machine. So I could use a dark or I could use an extra light, it doesn't really matter, but mainly I'm using like a medium to do all these shades. And I'm just skimming it on the top. Don't pass over that many times either, because you want to be able to build on these shades, so I wouldn't go over it, just literally a couple of passes, that is it. Because you want room to work on the skin. Obviously if this was on a real person, you wouldn't want to be going over and over and over to build the shades up. So as long as there's a bit of something there, it gives this effect that's more permanent. That way when I've got the black, it'll look really good. So there, that's one pass, it's done. A little bit more in here because there's barely anything there. Now with this fake skin, there's a lot of room for kind of error and adjustment. So you could kind of work at it as much as you want. But on real skin it is not the case. So it's good to get the practice in on here in the least amount of passes and building up and working as you can. Kind of practice that, getting that order down. And to be honest, we're not far off there. To be then putting the black in, there's just a couple more shades that I want to do and just be picky at. But yeah, you can already see there, we're built up enough to be putting the black in, which is going to be next. You'll notice like a lot of the time I'll dip between two inks, and that's just me being really picky. I'm like, do I need a medium or a light? So I'll kind of just dip between them both. They're not far off the same shade, so alright, there we have it with the round shader. And yeah, this is why I only use 3 needles, because that's pretty much all you need for a piece like this. It's kind of doing that order, and then pretty much what I'm going to do is the same again, but in a different kind of way to build it up. So it's just doing them steps in the right way to build the tattoo up properly in the correct order. Not sure if you can see that there, but that's sticking out. Just a couple of mil probably. I want it out quite a bit for this black. So yeah, same again, don't worry too much about getting right up to the edges or anything, because that's what we're going to come back in to do. But I always try and just do like small little circles for the black, and that gets it nice and solid. And I'm always trying to flick up so it's not just like a sudden stop. You'll notice it's always got that flick up. And then now I'm obviously doing it a lot faster just because I've had lots of practice doing this, but yeah, that's quite an important part, is getting that flick up. No parts I want to have like a really sudden sharp stop edge. See, I'm not even going to worry about getting anywhere near these lines, because I'm going to come back in with the round shader or the liner to get it in between those little fur textures. I have to admit, the combination of these needles and this machine works really well for the fake skin. The needles are like really high quality. It's actually one of my friends who has this needle brand, and he spoke to me about setting it up, and I know how picky he is with the products and stuff, so the amount of time it's took to take him to set up this company, but yeah, I knew straight away they'd be really good quality. I said before, they are quite expensive, but I actually think he's making like fuck all of these needles, because the amount of like high quality parts to the needle, even the membranes and the quality of the needle and the plastic on them, they're really good. So yeah, I knew straight away they'd be really good quality. I do find like the cheaper needles, like the standard Killering, EZ, whatever, they all look the same and they'll have a different colour on the end, and I do like them for black and grey, and they are the cheapest ones. I like them quite a lot for like the shading and soft textures. They give quite a blurry kind of look, but then in comparison to like a needle like this, you can tell like a big difference, especially for like putting in black areas. These just feel like a hell of a lot more accurate. They're not rattly. So I don't use like a certain needle brand. Depending on what tattoo I want to do is like what needle I'll use, because it is that big of a difference. It's like using like a different paintbrush or something. So like with this piece, it's perfect for these needles because it's really high contrast, heavy black parts, big blurry shades, and where the textures are that you really want to stand out, they're quite prominent, and these needles put in that really well, whereas like the more cheaper needles, it takes a bit more building up and it's not as accurate. Like this machine, I like it because it puts the ink in like fast and heavy. I'm not sure I'd use it like for everything, but I think like to get it softer I would just lower the volts. But I love it for these fake skins because they take so long to get the ink in. whereas these machines just like put it in so fast and smooth. They're just, I don't know, it just feels more accurate. But yeah, if you like, what needles do you guys use? If you have any like that you use that you really like, please let me know. I mean, like at the moment I literally use like 10 different needle brands and I kind of mix up between them all. I'm not sponsored by any, and I don't want to be sponsored by any, just because I do like using all different types for depending on what I'm tattooing. So I used to have a sponsorship with like a few different companies, and now I like what I like using, and I wouldn't want to just tie myself to using one. I would never do that. Like you do see a lot of people like they'll jump on a sponsorship and use them even though they're not very good. I prefer to just do nice tattoos and use what I want. You've got to kind of remember when you're doing these parts that you have marked it in and there's nothing to panic about, but I'm still really cautious when it comes to putting the black in that I'm rubbing off the stencil, which is, I suppose that's a good thing. Do you know what I mean? I prefer being more like that, and as much as I can keep the stencil on, that's what I'm kind of aiming to do. So parts like here, I haven't got the blend out and the kind of effect that I'm going for yet. So like on here where I've put the black in, it has got them little textures and kind of parts in, but like how I mentioned before, it's a case of building everything up. So I've shaded the black so it doesn't go up to that, so then it's got room for me to like use the round and make it eventually be that. I'm not aiming to do that straight away. I think once you've done like a few of these tattoos, you'll know yourself the order in which and how you want to go about it. So like with this tattoo, beforehand I've been looking at it all night and just seeing and planning how I'm going to go about it, and I've had enough practice now to kind of know the order that I've got down and how I'm going to do a tattoo. But it does help just really looking at it and planning. I do find it a lot better than just working like bottom to top on a tattoo and just mixing up the shades, because this way all of the shades are obviously like not mixed and they really stand out in its contrast. So try and get as close as you can to like the edges, but if it starts to become a struggle to do with the mag, it's fine, just do it to where you can and come back with the round shader to get things tighter, and then even come back with the liner. Don't worry about getting it right up to, you know, the first pass with these needles. I do find like now if I'm trying to get it up to a corner, I will just turn it on its side and use, so like this is 15 needles, but I'm probably only using like 3 of the needles. and I could even do a line with putting it on its side. It's that accurate. But kind of just remembering that flick as you're colouring, then it doesn't give such a harsh line. Right, let's swap this out to the round shader. And I have that sticking out quite far there. I'm going to put some black areas in with this as well, just ones that are a little bit too fiddly to use the mag for. It's the same with this, like the mag, like flicking it up so you don't have such a harsh finish. You can see here where I'm just flicking it and blending it into the shade as well as blacking an area. Now there's no building up with these parts, I just want them nice and solid, deep black, and then fading it out as it comes down into a shade. So even where I've got these like subtle lines that I've marked in, I'm kind of going right over them and kind of blending it out so the line isn't even there anymore. As you can see on these bits here, like there is a few bits where it's quite technical, and you couldn't do this with the mag, and that's why this needle is so handy. And even on some of these parts here, like I can't get right into the little parts that I want with this needle, so I will be using the liner to really sharpen things up. Now I'm trying to get like some textures in as I go, not getting too carried away because that'll come later down the line, but even just leaving areas for the texture to go in. And then now I can get into these fur parts because the round shader gives that kind of effect, and then little kind of fur flicks, the round shader is really good for that. So now where I've used the mag before, I'm going to get a little bit more closer into these parts where the fur is and on the chin. It's not going to be the final getting up to the lines, but it just gives me that little bit closer before I go in with the liner to really tighten it up. But yeah, it definitely helps just getting it that little bit closer. I'm already quite excited for when the black's all in. I can really start putting some details in then. But with something like this, it comes together really fast. Like once this black's in, it becomes a lot more easier to look at and start really putting some details in and having some fun with it. But yeah, I just find with like the round shader, it's a lot more accurate. You do, like the mag, obviously it's like it got a square end, so with the round shader it's a complete different style. And yeah, not a lot of people use the round shader, but I think like it's such a key needle to use for any tattoos. The one thing I will say, it does take a bit of practice to actually use this needle, because it can easily overwork the skin like on a real person. So to get the best use of that, like script is ideal to practice with this needle. And even on the fake skin, like just getting to grips with how you use it and what you use it for. But I think like all needles, you should kind of think like the depth of them and how you use them. Like even a liner, you are just colouring at the same depth, and like obviously the shades are lighter, but you are just colouring with the needle. So you've got to think the same with like all the needles. Just kind of think like what are they doing in the skin, and just try not to like overwork with them. So as you can see on this bit, the more in the background it is, the more looser I'm getting, like with the style and how I'm moving the needle to the black. Just trying to give that more blurry look for the background, and then as we get more into like the nose, mouth and eye, I want it to be like so sharp. And just using the round shader here just to really give that fur texture look. So where we've put like the markings on here, I'm just going over with the round. Now some of the whiskers will be way too thick, but I'm just kind of getting it more and more on there, and then I can go in with the liner and really start sharpening it up. Like here, I don't want it to be so harsh, so I'm kind of just dotting it about and flicking it out, and then I can go in with the liner and really start putting the details how I want them to be. So I'm keeping it a lot thinner than what it actually is on the picture, and then still trying to get a hint of what I'm going for with the round, like flicking it out, but that's mainly going to come with the liner. Now it doesn't matter in which order or how you do it, as long as the final piece is, you know, awesome, whatever way you find best to do this, that's what I always think. Like, I do this a lot differently to other people, and I think everyone, once you get your tattoos down and you're happy, you do end up kind of having your own way of doing things. I just think having an order really does help me get the tattoo to be how I want it, and it helps with like how it heals and how it looks and how it separates the shades to look really nice. So I'm going to try and get a little bit on the eye, just to get it to how I want to be, and then I might skip through a little bit, because on this piece, like in the others, I've kind of ran through how I'm going to be doing the black, so it is quite repetitive. So I'll skip through after this eye, and then we'll have all the black in. So all the black is quite the same technique. There's a few little bits which I've ran through that are a little bit different, but you've got all of the knowledge there to put the black in. Having the black fading out here really helps, so I think a good thing is to not have the black so solid. Having it so it fades out in each part you do really helps, because the more blocky it is, like even on the top of here, like I'm fading it out and kind of dotting a little bit of texture so it isn't just like a solid edge. Now I'm going over the line here, blending it in. Flicking it out there. And then going back in solid. Where this black blends into the eye, I'm kind of flicking it out best I can, but I'm not going to do the finished shade here. I'm just trying to flick it out a little bit so I can blend in the shades a lot easier when it comes to it, and that is absolutely perfect there where that is. Like here, just a little hint of a shade, just flicking it on the top. Keeping that that black on these fur bits in the right direction when I'm shading it. So I'm not colouring there, I'm putting it in as if it's individual little bits of fur. I can always go over with the mag to make it more solid. That this is solid black, but it's built up of fur. So if you imagine that in real life, you would see all the individual little bits of fur. And I think that just gives a better look than just black. So yeah, I'll skip through ahead, get the black parts in, and then we'll continue there with some shading. Right, now that we have the black parts in, we're going to start on some shades. So we've got the mag out. Just rinse it out in the light washes here. And now we can really start building up on these shades. So I want to start, I've got just dipped in like the medium. And I want to start just blending out some of these black areas. And I'm just skimming it on the surface here and just really flicking it out. Now on these blurry parts I can start trying to add in some of the kind of fur textures and just have them quite subtle, and that's just with blending like the black out So now that we have like the black in, it becomes a lot easier to add the shades and kind of turn it into like the more realistic looking tiger that you want it. So now that each shade that we do should really bring it to life. So like in here where it is quite white, I can now decide how dark that I want it to be with the parts of black next to it. So kind of just like each pass that I go over it, I can wipe it and see how dark I want it to be. And then I want to also get this tongue part in. And the best way to get kind of like these smooth blends and big parts like in the tongue done is just to really layer it up. I'll get this nice and clean before we then start on the tongue. Now it is going to be quite dirty because it's just had all of the black put in. I'm not going to get too carried away with like wiping the rest of it either, because the more we wipe the more of the stencil that we're going to lose. So I'm just going to lower these bolts down as well. So we're at 7.6 there on this machine. And I'm just going to really try and layer and build up the shades on this tongue. So literally just cross hatching back and forward. So we've got the first layers in there. I'm going to kind of jump around a bit on the tattoo now and kind of build up on the layers and just kind of get all the bits, the rest of the parts in that I need to get in before I can really start building up on top of these layers. Right, so you can see there, now we're up to, like, that's exactly how I want it to be before I start really putting texture in. So how I've got it now, I'm looking at it like I can really have fun with it. I can start putting textures and details in, and with the black and them greys being there, it's built up enough to see exactly what's going on. It's like easy to build on top of, and not only that, when it's tattooed on real skin, I know that's going to heal nice. And now, depending on what the skin tone's like as well, it'll massively affect what shading I'll put into it, because these are obviously really pale, but like the more tanned skin you get, the kind of less shades and the more contrast you want it to be. So doing it this way and getting it to how it is now is absolutely perfect. So I can add the shades in from here, and even if you did this on like a real person and they're tapped out, having this how it is now, you know, you can come back to it, and it's a good way of building it up. Like, I'm not missing any parts, it's easy to read now, so I can go from here and just have fun with like details and making it really cool. But you'll see from here it'll build up really nice. Each little bit we add's gonna make a big difference to the tattoo. So yeah, I'm gonna I might use like the liner now and add a few textures in, and then I can shade over the top of them to create that detail. But yeah, I'm going to put the textures in now on a few parts, and that way when I shade over the top, when it, like if that was on a real person, it'd heal and the textures would be there. Because if I did the shading then put textures, that really like dies down the textures, and sometimes they won't even be there when they heal. So the textures always have to be underneath first, or if you do want them like quite blurry, that's when you would do them afterwards. So parts like on here or around like the whiskers and the cheeks or under the eyes, you want that texture in first. Right, so we've got the liner out, ready to go. I've got it so far out, if you can see that there, but it's pretty much the maximum that it can go out. I like it, the needle hanging out really far. It's kind of like working off the tip of the needle, and it gives me like less ink blobs, well, most of the time anyways. I'm going to start putting in some of the details and textures. So same like what I said before, kind of flick the line out at the end so it doesn't just leave you with like a really harsh sudden stop. And what I do as well, I fade the line out both ways, so I kind of like ease in and then ease out. So as well, on these details, like on the parts that you're not so confident on, or you're not sure how dark to go, like these bits here are a prime example. Like, just do them lightly to start off with, give it a dab, see how dark it is, and then go back in, and you can build upon them lines. The last thing you want, especially on these textures, is like a line where you've gone in like way too harsh. So now on this part, on like the gum, I'm kind of just dabbing, I'm not doing it so harsh, and kind of shading with the needle and just dabbing it, seeing how dark it is, and then just like cross hatch, kind of shading, peppering it in on the top. I know that's a lot to take in, but kind of just mixing it up and kind of trying to give that effect. And the stipple kind of shading that I'm doing here will give it that detailed look. There's quite a bit of texture in like the gum, so I want to create that effect with the liner, and then I can always like deepen it with shades onto the top if some bits are a bit too harsh, or like what I'm doing now, if there's bits that are a bit too prominent or dotty, I can just stipple over and kind of blend it in a bit more. I am still only using the black, and that's pretty much that's all I'd use on anything to do when I'm doing the line. I would never use the greys. There's quite a lot of like little dotty parts here, and I'm trying to shade in between them with the liner to kind of just leave them, and then same even in the dark areas here, I'm kind of shading to create the texture but with the liner, and then kind of stippling it out as I go. And that's what will give it that detail. And then as you get up into kind of like the texture on the nose and where the whiskers are, it's kind of like a mix of stipple and little tiny lines, but just remembering not to kind of dig in. It's more shading in the lines and building them up. So like here, I could go over a line a couple of times, just skimming it until I'm happy, and then just dab it, and that looks about perfect to me, so I'll leave that one. Obviously the harder I want it to be, the more I press down on, and the slower that I go. Now you should still have some of the stencil there, so like on these parts you can still see where you can put in these lines and almost shade with the liner to create that detailed effect. Now it should be quite subtle like this, and it will take a little bit of building up, but that's exactly how you want it to be. You don't want it to be too harsh from the start. Like I said before, like unless it's black, it wants really like built up, and even if it means like coming back to the area and you kind of do a few bits at a time. So I don't want to finish this corner, I want to get a good chunk of it on before I start building up more, and that just gives me a good idea of how dark overall I want it to be. So I never kind of totally finish one tiny section at a time. I build up quite a lot of it and then kind of finish it. because I do find if you finish one part, it can just be that slightest bit too dark, so you're better off getting a few bits in, and then kind of like what I'm doing now, I'm just coming back and just darkening it and building them layers. So you see now it kind of blends more into the other parts a lot better. So as I go, if I see any bits that I can kind of sharpen, like I'm doing now, getting more up to the tooth, I will. So what I try and do is, like, if I'm using that needle, whatever I can do with that needle, what it's good for at the time, I'll use it and move around and do kind of like a few bits. So eventually this shading on the tongue will kind of match in and be dark enough to blend into these areas. Now down here on like the fur that's more into the background, I'm not gonna get so carried away with the textures, because I do want it to be like quite blurry as it goes back there. So I'm gonna just put a couple more near the chin, and then as it comes up it's gonna get into being quite blurry. So I don't want to use the liner too much over there. And what I'm doing now is I'm kind of doing the parts that I feel most comfortable with, and where the stencil, like if there's a part where the stencil is going to fade, I will concentrate more on that area. So you can see down where the mouth area is looks a lot better than the parts that we haven't touched yet with textures. And like, we're nowhere near finished, but it's just that next layer and building up. Right, so now we're going to be focusing on the textures and hair. I've got the liner set out ready, and that's going. We're on 7.8 volts, and I'm just going to be using the black. to do this, even though there will be some lighter areas. I think the main tip for the textures is not having it too dotty. You want to be kind of doing little lines in all different directions, but not so deep that it makes it like a black line. So if you see here, I'm just kind of scraping the surface, and I'll dab it and see how prominent it is, and that's the way that I kind of build it up. Now I'm trying to look at the picture as closely as I can, because I do want to follow the direction of which the hairs are going, especially for around that eye. But I'm going all different directions here, and even more closer to where the lines are, the kind of dips, I want it to be a little bit darker. So obviously the further that you push in, the more dark it'll be, but I want to kind of get this texture in all over. And then what I'll do is I'll shade over the top of the textures to give it that bit more depth. Now some bits are even quite dotty as well. So it's not all just like little lines. And when I wipe it, there isn't going to be that much there, and I'd rather, especially with the textures, is build it up to being how I want it, rather than go too harsh with them. Now you can near enough build it to how you want it to be with just the liner. But I do think adding the shades just gives it that little bit more. So I'm doing that same technique on most of these parts. Maybe further where it gets onto near the nose, it'll be more liney. It's nice once you've had a couple of passes over, you get to see the depth that what works, and I'd rather start off lighter and build it up darker than go in and go, fuck, that's too heavy. So just be really cautious, and you can get a feel of how much and how deep you need to go with it. Now it does look really prominent when it's first on, but obviously when you wipe it, it'll be a lot more subtle. And it's the same as kind of how I do with the shades, like as it tapers out, you can go from like the textures like this to literally skimming it right over, and that'll kind of blend them out. And that's just like a whip shade, and it gives it kind of like well, it is the stipple effect really, but just try and keep it from doing the little lines and etches, and then slowly flicking a little bit more, and that way it just tapers out so it doesn't come to like a sudden stop, otherwise it will look quite weird. As you can see here, even where I'm going into the black, I'm still dotting, and that kind of blends everything out then it just suddenly doesn't start going into textures. I find that's how it starts to look a lot more realistic, when everything blends, and it's like the same with these textures, if they're too harsh and they're too black, it will look very bizarre. And it's nice doing this with the black as well, because you can see exactly how it looks straight away, and that's probably how it will heal. It shouldn't lighten up too much. When you put the shades over the top, it'll blur it a little bit. You can see here I'm following the lines of the direction of the hair, rather than going all different directions like I am on the nose. And these won't be that prominent, but then as I wipe it and build over the top, I can kind of make it more and more prominent as I go. And that's the thing as well with these textures, you don't want to rush it, and that's when it is so easy to just go that little bit too dark because you feel like just getting it in faster. But doing it like this, it looks a lot more real. So it is quite a slow process, especially on a big piece like this. It's a lot of building up. Some parts on here I might do and then shade over the top and then come back to other parts, and that's just because I really like to get an idea of how it looks. You can see already with a little bit of texture it's already looking better. So I'm really excited to get all of that in, and then I can really start having fun with the shades over the top. I think doing it this way is like, it's literally the difference between making it look really nice and realistic, whereas I could just shade this and it'd be a lot faster, but it would look nowhere near as good. So as I'm putting these little lines in, like I've mentioned before with other different needles, I don't want to put the needle in then go across. I want to ease it in and ease it out, and that won't give it a sudden kind of like a dot of a line. I am quite used to it, so I do it really fast. But I do feel like it is one of those techniques where you do need to do it quite fast, because if you have a sudden stop on an area, it will give you like a dot, and that isn't kind of what you want with something like this. It wants to look like lots of little bits of fur, so there doesn't want to be a blob at the end of a bit of fur. Now some of these parts where you do have a line, things will start blending and disappearing together, kind of like this section now, and that's where the shade will really come in and kind of give you that line back. But don't worry about that too much until you come to put the shades in. Now I want these textures in first, because if I shaded first and put the textures in afterwards, they would go really blurry, and when it heals like on a real person they wouldn't be there. So I'm doing it in the order that I would tattooing it on a person. And then also, while I've got the liner out, I'm going to put some of these fur black details in that I couldn't get to before with the bigger needles. These are the textures as well, but they're a lot more darker. But even with these bits, there is a bit of a build-up. Don't feel like you have to do it all in one pass. Like I'm going to be doing a pass here and then coming back to it, making it that little bit more blurry. So I do find, like, if I've got the liner out, I'll do kind of as much as I can with that needle while I've got it out. So I will kind of jump around and do different parts as I go. I just find that if I'm always swapping needles to do one section, it's just quite irritating, so I'd rather get what I can done with that needle while it's out. It saves me a lot of time. So now we're at kind of a point where there's a lot of texture in on here. I'm gonna get quite a lot more in and get a few bits done before I start putting some shades, but it will look very gappy in comparison to the picture. But then as you shade over the top, it'll kind of blend and blur together, so you don't want to get too carried away and it all be from the texture. You do want that room to adjust and blend. So yeah, just don't get too carried away. It will look a little bit dotty to start off with.
Right, so we've got the round shader going now, and I'm just going in between like the medium and light at the moment, and I'll probably dip between a few shades as to kind of what I feel certain parts need. but I'm going to start blending in some of these textures, and you'll notice on this picture, if I put it really close next to it, some of these parts here where they have a shade. So there's the texture, then there's the shade. So I've done the textures now, which looks really gappy, but now I'm going to put the shade over the top with the round, and then maybe go over with the mag to kind of blend that if I feel like it needs it. So with the round shader here, I'm not going even so smooth, I'm really big areas of crosshatch, and that way it still kind of like keeps the texture going, because I definitely don't I don't want it too smooth. So I'm almost doing that stipple effect but with the round shader, and I've just dipped in the dark now. Once you get an idea of how it goes in, you can kind of mix between what shades you feel like works better. But to be honest, the shades aren't too important with a part like this, it's just what you feel comfortable. Kind of like the lighter the shade, the slower it'll take to build up. But I definitely recommend more on the dark shade here and just really skimming over the top. It'll take a little bit of building up, but it'll keep that textured look. So now we're seeing things start to really take shape. I'm kind of at that point where I can really have fun with it now, and adding details, just really look between the picture and the tattoo. I have made it a little bit more contrast, and I feel like everything when I tattoo it, I want to make it work better for a tattoo. So some parts where it will be a bit more contrast than the picture, and I quite like that, and building it up this way, it gives me the chance to have a look, see where I want to kind of make it a bit more saturated. So now what I'm really doing is I'm kind of mixing up between the needles. I'm gonna kind of blend some bits out with the mag, and then I'm gonna put some little details in with the liner and the round shader. But you can see here, like, I think a really important part is whatever shade that you're doing is you follow the lines and the direction of which it's going. So like even on the teeth here, I'm kind of following it upwards, and then cross-hatching, but always keeping that the direction of which the shades are going. I love this stage where I can just really pick at it and kind of get my little bit of style and more have fun with it when it gets to this point. Now obviously, like when you tattoo stuff, it is like a little bit more blurry than what you could get it if you were drawing it. So I think with practicing on the fake skin, it's so good to practice like your techniques to get as much detail in a piece as you can. I have noticed since I've started doing these fake skins, it has got me like a lot better with tattooing, and I think it's just given me that practice. I can almost see it's like tattooing it and it heals straight away on these, obviously because it doesn't go red, so it's really good for like putting the shades in and knowing exactly how it's going to be when it's healed. But yeah, in regards to this machine, like I've recently done a review on it, and I decided to use it on this piece just to kind of see more how I find it, and I'm not going to lie, I've absolutely loved using it for this tattoo, and I think next I will be using it to do some tattoos with, because I found it absolutely brilliant for doing this. I think the whole part of it being, it just seems so like accurate with the shades, and it's easy to use. I mean, I do really like the injector as well, so I think for me this machine, I'm going to be using it a lot for like travelling, and definitely on these fake skins, because it does seem like a lot more powerful. It's easy to put the shades in, so I'm pretty curious to see what it's like on a person. So as well, like when I'm doing this, I'm trying to get it a lot more blurry as it comes to the outside of the tattoo, then it fades out nicely, and that's kind of for like the look of this, because I'm doing it on like a round canvas, but it seems really good like in general just for practicing like a nice fade out on the shades and stuff like that. Like around here where the whiskers are on this side, I want them quite like blurry, and for it to fade out. The good thing now as well, like when I'm using the mag, if I turn that like right on its side, it's good for like really thin hairs. So especially up like parts where these black bits and you want to fade it out. That's kind of what I'm doing to get the really fine hairs and the flick out. On something like if I was doing like a portrait, that's the kind of technique that I'd use to do the hair as well. It's absolutely perfect for getting like 10 really thin lines, because you couldn't really do that with a liner, it'd be a nightmare. Whereas the mag kind of gives it that softer, more realistic look. So I'm going to do a few more details with the round shader now, and I'm just kind of picking at anything I can see now and really have fun with it. But there's a few parts on like the teeth I want to do a bit more, and maybe a few textures. But it should be a hell of a lot easier now to look at kind of like what needs done, what needs a little bit more. bits like this now are like really important to get it from like just like a good piece to something that you're really happy with. And I always do this at like more towards the end of a tattoo. I'll go in and I'll just refine and refine and get it to somewhere where I'm really happy. And I think even when you're doing tattoos and you think you're finished, it's always worth just giving it a couple of minutes, having a look, and just be really picky and refine and get it to exactly how you want it to be. I mean, especially with like a tattoo like this, I'll probably end up coming like back to it and back to it. Because it's on fake skin, I can work and work at it as long as I want to. So at some point I probably will come back, and even the ones that I've done on previous videos, I have always done a little bit extra and a bit more. Even when I think I'm finished, I'll give it a couple of days and I'll want to do bits more on them. So and I feel like now, even like these tiny little bits that I'm doing now, they make such a big difference when I give it a wipe. it's finally getting to somewhere where we want it to be. I'll probably even put some white highlights in soon, and I'd say we're not far off finished. Like I said before, I might come back in at some point and just be really picky and go over bits, but this is kind of all the techniques and steps that you need to get it to where you want it to be. And to be honest, depending on like the skin type and how it goes when you're actually tattooing it, you might have even been finished up a little bit earlier. So I'm going to pick at a couple more bits, and then I'm going to put some white highlights in to really make some bits stand out. So like on these teeth, you can see that I've put like round shader and just really dragged the lines down, and that just gives them nice, it's kind of like giving the bits effects that you can get that are similar to the photo. Like, because if you looked really up close at them, you would have kind of like little grooves and textures, but with a tattoo I feel like you need to do a simplified version of what you're going for to get it as much like the picture as you can. So that's why I always say, like, follow the lines of the shades, and kind of just exaggerate parts to make it the best you can like the picture. But I feel like the round shader, what I'm using now, is such a key part in getting like a lot of the details. Well, it works for me anyways. It really helps to get a lot of them shades that I couldn't kind of accomplish with the mag. Right, cool. So we're on the final touches here, the white highlights, which are probably the most fun to do. So I've got the white out ready. I'm just using dynamic white. I am on the lookout for a better white though, so it's not actually, I don't find it the best. I have used better, but it does the job. It's okay, and it's all I have at the moment. So yeah, I'm using that. The thing I find with it, it's really runny. It's like milky. And I have used ones before where they just seem a little bit thicker and a bit more better. The black inks from Dynamic are perfect, but yeah, I'm not so keen on the white. I'm using the Black Crown cartridges as the needles for all of this tattoo. And I think this is the first time I've gave them like a proper run out on a full tattoo, and I absolutely love them. They're perfect for shading, lining. I can't really fault them at all. They are pretty expensive, but I think the quality says it all. They're absolutely perfect needles. I've not had one dodgy one in a pack, which normally you do get a few, and they just feel really precise and quality. It's pretty handy having the number on the needle as well. So that says 5 because it's a 5 round liner, and all the other needles have that and say which they are. And if you have a few liners out, it does get confusing, and I don't know how that isn't a thing on any other needles. But that's the first I've seen them have that. But yeah, they're really good quality. I definitely recommend them, especially as you progress in the tattooing. To be fair, even to begin with, I wouldn't ever use shit. So yeah, these are really decent quality. You can't really get any better. So I actually need to put them volts up a little bit. We're on 7 volts there. I really want it at like 8 volts. Especially on like fake skin, you can kind of go at it a lot easier. It's nice to finally like get these teeth how I want them, and yeah, these white highlights are going to help massively. So like I said before, with dragging the texture up with the round shader, I'm kind of doing the same thing with the liner now, and I think that just creates like a really nice effect. It looks more like a tooth and gives it that detail. I'm putting these little shiny bits on the gum, and this is what I did at the very start of the tattoo, and it's nice to come in and really make this, because I think on this part it's like quite a wet look, and having it really high contrast and with the black, it really needs the white to make it pop. Yeah, that's a massive difference there. And like with these parts here, they don't, like I said at the very start, I'm not trying to get it exactly the same, because that would be an absolute nightmare on some of these parts. I'm more going for the look being the same. So like if you're doing the hair, you're not going to get every strand of hair the same as the picture. You're just going for that effect being the same, and that's what I'm doing here on like the highlights and parts on the gum. So what I'm doing here, rather than putting the white in like a line, and more stippling it in, and I find that gives it a lot better look, and that way you won't kind of overwork the white, because it's quite easy to press the white and you just want it in like really solid, which everyone does, and you want it to be in really nice. And the stipple effect seems to it helps me kind of like build the white up. You're not going over it too many times, and I just think of this like any other needle. I'm not pressing any deeper. I am just going that little bit slower because I don't want to pass over the white like at all, really, unless it's like turning the area grey. I really want it to be in first time and prominent, because if you go over the white areas, they'll turn like a mucky brown yellow colour on real people. So the white, I always want that to be in like first time if possible. It'd be very rare that I'll come back over the white. So this part here is quite a good trick. So for the eye, you can see I've left this bit like a little bit lighter. It's still shaded a tiny bit, but to give it that real glass look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just skim over the top with the white and just cross hatch it. And what this does on real skin is it just turns it like a nice grey colour, and that's like one of the only areas that I'll shade with the white. I might do a little bit underneath on the brow or maybe the nose, but I just think that gives it a really nice look on the eye and makes it stand out. And then same again here. I'll give that a nice little skim over. Now I'm doing this like really close up lines, but you can also just do it line by line if you find that more comfortable. They give a very similar effect. So I like what I'm doing here, more spaced out, just line by line. And that just enhances it a lot more. And then same on the nose. There's not much of a pass going in over here because I just want a very subtle tinge of it just turning grey.
And there we have it, we are done. Like I said, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments down below, and I'll try and get back to you as soon as I can. But yeah, I really hope this has helped anyone who's getting into realism, and if you've enjoyed it, please give me a subscribe or a share, and let me know if you want me to do any videos on something that you're stuck with or want to know more about. Yeah, let me know.